Welcome to the Strange Rainbows podcast, episode 5, Fall. Hi, last Sunday, the 22nd September, was the autumn equinox. Just like on the vernal equinox in spring, the sun is directly above the equator and day and night are of equal length all across the globe. How strange is that? It's a thin day, Mabon in the Celtic calendar, the day when the light and dark of the year pass as equals before darkness is in ascendance. Now the nights stretch longer than the days, as light hides from the shadows. It's the first day of autumn. We'll come back to the Celtic calendar on Samhain, the 31st of October, which marks the start of the Celtic year, and will be following the 8 major festivals of the year, first with Samhain and then Yule, all the way through to next year's Mabon. Today we have an autumnal poem, based on the superstition that if you catch a leaf as it's falling from the tree, you'll have good luck and can spend it in a wish. Then we'll have a story about a long dark fall, and to finish off, some thoughts about fun things to do in autumn. It's a good time to get outside and enjoy the beautiful autumn colours and the falling of the leaves, and remember to keep our eyes open in case we can reach out and catch some luck. Catch a leaf. Summer reels with careless heart, the days are long, the evenings warm, our carefree joy will never end. Close our hopeful eyes and dance in the light. Cooling breeze blows harder now, all rustling leaves and slowing dance. Dance on, dance faster, keep it bright. Summer slowly falls, robin calls autumn. Summer's green retreats in fear, what flourishes begins to fade. The season turns, it can't be held, leaves brown to golden, autumn glory shines. Summer left, so let it fall. It's not so dark, the year's not done. There's slower waltzes to be danced, quiet pleasures whisper, savour the slowness. Gold falls past from the branches, stretch out a hand and take your chance. If one decides you where it falls, thank it earnestly, luck is upon you. If you catch a falling leaf, then you can make a little wish for something small that you would like, airy like the breeze, leaf thin and fragile. Wish for health or wish for gold, forever to be hale and strong, or good things for the ones you love, hope for the hopeless, and light in the dark. Samhain nears, the stone walls thin, the dark things crawl and slither close, to feed and feast on your sweet fear. So reach for a leaf, wish just to survive. Hold it fast, the leaf a shield against the dark and winter's chill. It comes for you, and for us all. We fall like the leaves, caught, stolen, and gone. The Long Fall. Once upon a fantasy, in the mythical realm of Generica, a Ghibellin tinker travelled from village to village, mending wares and taking but a copper and a little food in payment. Generica was a vast realm, full of trollkins and tolkins, elves and wizards, Ghibellins and groblins. There were many kingdoms, with their many queens and kings, princesses and princes. Danger and adventure lurked in countless caves, caverns, dungeons, and dark corners, and dauntless heroes were ready to explore them and reap the rewards of gold and glory. Alongside all this excitement were the boring places on the map, quiet places where a small town or village kept to themselves, farming the land as best they could and living out their small stories. It was in the village of Lower Turnip, in the foothills of the mountains of Ntharg, on the western side of the kingdom of Leith, towards the northeast of the land of Valian, that this small story takes place. Lower Turnip was a village of several dozen Groblin inhabitants, mostly farmers, some poorer than most, one called Pottle, who had declared himself mayor. None of the others were too bothered, so they let him organise the occasional meeting, where they would all gripe about the weather and about each other, as his wife Myrna served tea, and on special occasions blackberry cider. It was rare for the villagers to travel more than a dozen miles from where they'd been born, and farming the land was what they knew. They were a superstitious folk, and would often put corn buddies in the windows, mutter wise sayings about the weather like, "Red sky tonight, tomorrow's sun be bright," and carry out all sorts of small rituals meant to gain favour and ward off harm, for these things had power, and failing to respect the magic in the blood and bones of the land could lead to disaster. Occasionally a travel-lost hero or itinerant tinker would pass through the village, and then there would be gossip. Not all tinkers have electric blue eyes, for some have dark, gloomy ones, and are vindictive if not treated well. So it was with Scragg, a travelling Gibbelin repairer of metals and caster of minor incantations who passed through the town one harvest time. Farmers, both husband and wife, and any of their children old enough to carry a handful of hay, were out all hours of daylight bringing in the crops. When Scragg arrived at the village as dusk was setting, the exhausted farmers were returning to their homes for a good dinner and a deep sleep until the sun rose again. So they were perhaps less friendly than they might otherwise have been when this short, crooked-legged Gibbelin with his pack full of tools and trade goods set up outside the mayor's cottage, which was slightly larger than the others and had a wooden P for pottle above the door. "Tinking, tinking, tell me what you're thinking," sang the Gibbelin. "Any iron, any metal, I'll fix it for a copper, and you can fix me tea for my supper." Some of the farmers fetched a broken pitchfork, a dulled scythe, or a leaky teapot and asked for a mending. The Gibbelin worked through the night, and when the farmers rose the next morning, all things were fixed and ready. Scragg held out his cap for a copper, and each of the farmers paid, leaving also a turnip or a bunch of carrots, and one offered a small chicken, for they knew to be generous to a tinker, and it was the time of harvest when they had food aplenty. The last to head out was Pottle, for he liked to take his time over breakfast, so was late getting out to his fields. Myrna had already headed out, reminding him to pay the tinker before he joined her. As he left his cottage, he stepped over the tinker, who was sleeping and snoring loudly in the street outside his gate. Something about this bitter-faced Gibbelin sleeping all crook-limbed outside his house annoyed the mayor. "You can't sleep there, it's the town hall," he said. But the tinker snored on. "Fine, well then, I'll take my payment for lodgings." And rather than putting a copper into the cap for the repairs to his kettle, he took one out, and as the Gibbelin stirred and grunted, he hurried out to the fields. He hadn't become mayor of Lower Turnip by just giving things away, and anyway, the tinker was just a Gibbelin. Scragg woke in the afternoon, refreshed and ready to head out to the next village. The repairs he'd made were good, and would last the year until his next visit. He packed up the vegetables, gave the chicken who would be his companion and hopefully provide him with eggs the name Tickle, and counted the few coppers in his cap. It was a meagre haul, barely enough to keep him in business, but that was the life of a tinker. But wait, the count didn't match, so he counted them again, and again. He was 2 coppers short. He had made a tinker's dozen repairs, so it should be 13 coppers, and instead it was 11. He searched around, but there were no more fallen to the ground nearby or placed on his pack. So, someone had not only failed to pay for their repair, they had taken out a copper? This enraged him, for to be met with dishonesty after performing honest hard work is not the right way of things. He grumbled and growled, stamped on the ground, and glared at the small poor village with dark eyes flashing. His gaze fell on the P above the cottage next to him, and he smiled a grim, nasty little smile. "Very well, I see one is above the rest, and though most are straight, one is crooked." He jiggled the coppers in his cap, taking one at random and focusing his dark ire on it, before flipping it high into the air behind him. "May your luck fall where it deserves," he declared, and was on his way. The dark copper coin landed on its side, kicking up a little puff of dust. Ever so slowly it sank into the earth, like some magnetical force was dragging it down. By evening, when the farmers returned, it had fully sunk into the ground, and there was just a tiny hole where it had been. The next day the hole was a little larger, and by the end of the week it was the size of a pothole. One of the farmers tripped over it, complaining to the mayor that it was his business to make sure the road was well kept, especially right outside the town hall. Cursing, the mayor filled it in with stones that were gone in the morning. Just gone, and the pothole was now a foot deep, and perhaps due to the angle of the sun in the morning, the bottom of it was in darkness. He covered it with a board, and the next morning the board was gone. He was irate, for surely someone had taken it, and the hole was now a little larger, and when he dropped a stone into it, there was no sound of it hitting the bottom. how deep was it? He had to work the fields through the day, so he placed 2 planks in an X over it so nobody could fall in and blame him, for the hole was right at the edge of his property. That evening the planks were gone too, and the hole was larger, 2 feet wide, and unnaturally dark. Pottle was worried now, and several tired farmers came to join him as he stood at the edge of the hole looking down. "Done some evil, Mayor?" asked one in jest, and the Mayor vehemently denied it. He lit a torch and dropped it into the hole, and the light disappeared from sight below. The 2 farmers standing by were witness to it. This was a deep hole. There was much gossip in the fields the next day, and in the evening the Mayor held a meeting at the town hall to discuss the situation. "The hole is a hazard." "Why is it outside your house?" "What's the dark magic here?" complained the superstitious villagers. "Perhaps if you can't fix it, you shouldn't be mayor," said others. Pottle promised to resolve the situation, and yes, of course he should be mayor, for didn't he have the slightly larger cottage, and wasn't there a fine P above the door? Myrna handed around herbal tea to calm their angry minds, and soon enough the talk turned to other things. As the farmers passed by the hole on their way home, they made signs to ward off evil, and left a few small offerings at the edge to appease whatever dark spirits might be hiding down there. In the morning the offerings were gone, and the hole had not grown larger in size. So the farmers continued to make offerings each night, a turnip here and an onion there, just small things, for the harvest had been good and they had some to spare. And though the hole remained, some thought perhaps it had shrunk a little. A few days later the first wizard appeared from the nearby town of Greater Turnip. Just a small one, barely a hedge wizard, with rather a short beard. He wasn't even a full-time wizard, but it was his hobby, and he had an apprentice to carry his few arcane instruments and books. He was here to study the hole, for perhaps it was some new kind of magic, and he could make his name by reporting on it. The Mayor rushed out to greet him cordially and inform him of the 1 silver required for any who wished to study the hole. Grudgingly the wizard handed over the coin, and bade his apprentice take measurements with a compass of sorts and several other strange instruments, as he made notes in his journal. "Aha! Interesting. Fascinating. Yes, I see," he would say, and make more notes. He observed the offerings made by the local farmers and made sketches in his journal. Bidding his apprentice keep watch through the night, he slept comfortably in the Mayor's cottage for the price of another silver, and 1 more for the dinner. In the morning he woke his sleeping apprentice with a sigh. The offerings were gone. Taking some more measurements, he decided the hole had grown a fraction, and hurried away back to town to publish his report. The first heroes arrived the next week. There was another wizard, this one more powerful, judging by the length of his beard, a hexer, 2 sneaky rogues, and a handful of burly warriors. They had heard tale of the hole from a mysterious stranger in a dingy tavern, and had been bidden to come and investigate, slay any monsters, and keep any treasures, and here they were. Pottle informed them of the 1 gold coin required for any to investigate the hole, and they paid without complaint, for there was much glory to be earned, and treasure to be found. The assembled party caroused long into the night, drinking most of the blackberry cider as they bonded and made plans to investigate the hole, causing quite a ruckus in the cottage. Myrna complained that the heroes were making a real mess, and Pottle bid her be still, for their gold was good. In the morning the hole was twice the size, and had swallowed the front gate and part of the fence. Farmers had to carefully steer past it on their way out to the fields, and Pottle bustled out to assure them that there were heroes here now to resolve the situation. And as he had to stay with the heroes to remind them how important he was, and that the 1 gold fee was in fact per day, and required his wife to stay and prepare victuals and beer, his crops were left unharvested in the fields. The heroes studied the hole and threw all kinds of things in, listening for echoes or sounds of hitting the bottom. 1 warrior poked it with a 10-foot pole, and a rogue threw in a handful of caltrops for some reason. The wizard took measurements, and the hexer cast a light spell on a stone and threw that in. It fell quickly out of sight into the depths of the hole. They tied another lighted stone to a rope and lowered it in, and that disappeared out of sight too, and was unlit when they pulled it back out. This hole might be hundreds of feet deep, or bottomless, or lead to caves full of gold and diamonds. With that thought, the greedier of the rogues offered to be lowered down on a rope. They were lowered down into the darkness, out of sight after a minute, and then after another the rope yanked and twisted like they were being eaten by a monster, and they were quickly pulled back up. The rogues' hair was white, their black leathers were fully white, even their eyes were white. It was like all colour had been leached from them. They uttered not a word, just stared wide-eyed and ran off towards the mountains of Ntharg as fast as their shaking legs could carry them. After this, several spells were cast into the hole, including a fireball by the long-bearded wizard, which zished down the hole, disappearing out of sight. The hole grew visibly, and they all backed away quickly. It was now as many as 12 feet across, and the darkness below was sloshing slightly, as might a deep, dark ocean. It had a hypnotic pull, luring them to jump in. Just jump into the darkness. The wizard swayed with vertigo and took a step forwards, thanking the burly warrior who pulled him back from the brink. Perhaps there were daemons and devils, and it was a portal to one of the 7 hells itself, the hero speculated over beer and lunch. Perhaps there were no caves full of gold and diamonds, and the whole place was cursed. Perhaps there were other, more pressing adventures they should attend to. The heroes left the village that day. As autumn fell towards winter, the supplies grew leaner, and the farmers took to throwing their waste into the hole, for if it was bottomless, at least it could be useful. The mayor commanded, then asked, then begged them to stop, for each time they did the hole grew until it had swallowed the whole of his front garden and was approaching the cottage itself. They laughed at him and mocked him, for they were sure now the hole was a curse of his doing somehow, and whatever happened to him was well deserved. He stopped sleeping, and would sit awake at night watching the hole, as if by watching it he could stop it growing, and yet at times he must blink or would doze off for a minute, and either way the hole continued to grow, and one night there was a great crack as his front door was swallowed by the hole, and the pea slowly listed and fell off the wall and tumbled down into the darkness. "What have you done?" demanded Myrna, and as always he denied having done anything. He had a bag of coins, gold from the heroes and silver from the first wizard, and even a single copper from somewhere, all his, and he could use it to rebuild, far from here. As the hole grew each night and swallowed his house piece by piece, he salvaged a remaining bottle of blackberry cider from the cellar, and finished the whole thing off himself, throwing the empty bottle into the hole. And so it was that he found himself standing at the edge of the hole, in the remains of his house, relieving himself down into it. "Eat my house, will you?" he shouted down at it. "Eat this! Eat this!" And maybe it was the cider in his blood, or the ragged angle of the planks of his half-devoured living room, or his madness itself, but he slipped and lost his balance, and slid into the hole. He screamed like a little girl on the way down, his scream cut off after a moment as he was lost to sight. His bag of coins had fallen from his hand as he scrabbled on the way down, and they had rolled out left and right, some falling into the hole, and for all we know, Mayor Pottle may still be falling to this day. The hole was smaller the next day, retreating from the road towards the ruins of the mayor's cottage. Myrna found the coins scattered across the remains of the living room in the morning, and clear signs of what had happened. Pottle would never have left coins lying there for anyone to find. She threw the gold and silver coins in, and her wedding band for good measure. A single copper coin she kept, for she knew what she had to do. She packed tools and supplies for the journey, and left the village that same day. She travelled north to Lesser Turnip, which was the next village, a day's walk away. Had the tinker been here? Yes, he had passed through 2 months ago. She worked for her supper, for she was a hard worker, and carried on the next day. Soon she was told, yes, the tinker had passed through here a month ago, then 2 weeks ago, and then just last week. Finally, in the middle of spring, she reached the village where the tinker was just packing up to leave, having repaired several pots, a cauldron handle, and a cartwheel. She was gaunt and tired by this time from her long journey, and her hands more full of calluses than ever since she had been working and travelling every day. "Stay a moment, tinker, I have something for you," she called, and handed him the single copper, plus 1 more she had earned along the way, and a third for good measure. "Payment for services rendered," she said, and the tinker nodded and stashed the coins away in his pack. He made to leave, regarding the tired but honest woman as he went. A thought crossed his mind. "Hard worker are you?" he asked. "I've worked my supper each night and travelled long each day to catch up with you," she said. "And good with those hands." "I can dig and build, and sew and stitch, and have picked up some other useful skills along the way." "Aha! And travelling to the next village, are you?" he asked, with a slight smile on his lined and grisly face. Myrna considered for a moment, and said with her own smile, "I reckon I might as well be. You can tag along if you like." And over time, the travelling tinkers visited many villages in that part of the realm, and stitched many torn clothes, and mended many pots. And back in the village of Lower Turnip, a bottomless dark hole a foot across stands in the middle of the ruins of a half-devoured cottage, and every night an offering of some kind is left at the edge, and every morning it is gone. Autumn. I like autumn. It's just the coziest season, like putting on a fresh warm hoodie and drinking hot tea as the cool breeze blows leaves down from the trees. I started researching how the Earth's wobble around the sun gives us our seasons, but nah. Instead of all that, here's a few fun things to do in autumn. It's hoodie weather, so why not put on a warm one and look cool when you're out and about? Trees are deeply magical, and the golden brown autumn colours are a great excuse to go out for a walk in the woods. If it's windy, you might get lucky and catch a falling leaf, and then you can spend it on a wish. While you're out there, kick up some leaves and enjoy the swish and crunch. Just be careful not to kick any hedgehogs hiding in there. If you want to show kindness to the fairies, you can build them a little house with twigs and leaves sheltered at the base of a tree. They'll appreciate the gesture. And why not bring a few of those leaves home? You can use them to make all kinds of art. Trace around them, colour in the shapes, paint the leaves bright colours and press them onto paper, or arrange them like flowers in a bowl. If you pass a horse chestnut tree, pick up some of the rich brown nuts, maybe still hidden in their spiky green cases. Drill a hole through the middle, and pass some string through knotted at one end. Now you can play conkers, taking turns to swing at the one your opponent is holding until one cracks open. If you want to cheat, cook them in vinegar first. It's going to rain at some point, so why not go out rain dancing? Forget your umbrella. This is about dancing freely in the rain, enjoying the splash and feel of it, and jumping in the puddles. Fine, you can take your gumboots or wellies, and wear a raincoat if you really want. If you have a tent, you can go ghost camping, best done on a dry night. Set it up in the garden or wherever, and stay out overnight, build a little campfire, and tell ghost stories. Very cozy, and a little bit scary too. Or stay inside and find yourself a book nook, where you can drink a warm cocoa, eat some cookies, and read a book just for fun. Best done when it's raining outside, 'cause then it feels even cozier. If you live in the right place, you might get to see the northern or southern lights, the aurora made in the sky by solar winds interacting with the Earth's atmosphere. Or you might get to see fog softening the town around you, covering it in cozy mystery. Autumn has a lot of weather to offer. Why not celebrate the harvest by donating to a food bank if you can? If you're a squirrel, you might want to put some food aside for winter, or if you're a bear, just stay in and hibernate. We'll have some cozy autumnal poems over on Patreon this Saturday. Another cozy thing coming up is World Postcard Day on the 1st of October, a good time to send a random card of kindness or do some post crossing. So that'll be our theme next week, with a poem about post, a few thoughts about postcarding, and a spooky story about a really dead letter office. Have a cozy autumnal week, and may good luck fall into your outstretched hand. Thanks for listening. The Strange Rainbows podcast is copyright Mike Storm 2024, all rights reserved. It is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual names, characters, businesses, places, events, or persons, living, dead, or imaginary, is entirely coincidental.